Daria, thank you for this introduction. Uh, Hello, everyone. As I noted in the title of my report, I would like to talk about two groups, two actors whose space of interaction were orphanages in Soviet Ukraine in 1928 and 1935. The focus of my research is the inmates and staff of institutions, and the main cases are orphans from Kharkiv, Kyiv, and Chernigiv. The main point and framework of my research is that the policy of the Soviet regime on children in the Ukrainian Republic, implemented through the orphanage system, can be considered as a genocidal practice, in the literature known as forcible transfers of children. The following questions are important to my research. How did state representatives justify the importance of such a policy? To what extent have these signals been heard by the executors in the field, and what has become their intrinsic motivation? Who were the inmates of the orphanage system? What were the strategies for their engagement with the staff? For my argument regarding the position on the FTC, a few theoretical remarks are important to begin with. How it works? First, I describe the period of 1928-1935 as the period of the Holodomor, going beyond describing this phenomenon as the famine of 1932-33. The starting point for this position is the ideas of Raphael Lemkin, certainly understanding that Lemkin activities had a political background. However, in matters of genocide, certain politicization still cannot be avoided. For the Ukrainian Holodomor studies, such focus as well as attention to FTC practice are almost not existent, and a comparative approach to genocide studies is important for the study. I argue that orphanage inmates as a differentiated group trying to describe the multiplicity of experience of an individual child, as well as the multiplicity of distress he or she experienced using intersectional theory. Regarding those whom I designate as educators, my focus is on all the staff of orphanages, which represents as ordinary executors of the Stalinist regime. But I would interpret educators as, to some extent, perpetrators in the implementation of genocidal practice. I tried to analysis of both groups and offer certain versions regarding the motivation of the employees of the institutions to become implementers of the policy declared by Moscow. A new stage of the policy on children falling into the system of state care in the USSR was in 1929-1935. Such a policy can be seen in the context of the so-called state interventionism, characteristic of the countries of Eastern Europe, for example, for Romania or Bulgaria. However, for the country under the construction of communism, the component of the system was the over-politicization of child nurture. Finally, I'd like to dwell on an interesting moment in the historiography inherent in the Soviet period, but inherited by Russian literature, for example. In this focus, the inmates of the orphanage system were victims of the civil war, which allegedly removed the blame from the Soviet system. In the center of the narrative, according to the Soviet canon, to have heroes in every sphere of society, were placed such persons as Anton Makarenko, who were presented as innovates. Children from birth to the age of majority got into different types of special institutions. Questionnaires that were formed for each child contained information about their age, marital status, nationality, social background, reason for entering the institution. In the paradigm of the educational process at that time, the child seemed to be a passive object of the upbringing process. However, this wasn't the only pressure on the inmates of orphanages. The thesis of official propaganda of orphans who are paternally saved by the Soviet authorities, taking them from the street, are not supported by these documents. And only 15% of the children were orphans. The initiation to send a child who had a family into an orphanage could come from the state itself through special control bodies. It could also be the parents or other relatives of the child. I'm asking you to admit my younger brother to the institution. My salary is not enough to provide and raise him. Or please accept my 7 years old daughter due to poor financial conditions. The report of the commission that removed two daughters from their mother, a factory worker, informs that she was sleeping with the children on the floor in the factory premises, which led to tuberculosis. On the documents, it is impossible to see national discrimination, in particular due to the colonization policy that lasted during the first years of the Holodomor. An interesting example of its implementation is Lenin Children's Town in Kiev. Orphanage inmates were divided into several national groups, for example, Ukrainians, Russian, Jews. Work with children and internal documentation in groups were conducted in national languages, Ukrainian, Russian, Yiddish. Interestingly, the desire to become a useful citizen of the Republic, Ukrainian state, was stated in Russian and Jewish groups too. Employees were offered questionnaires that include questions about awareness of the political situation in the Russian Federation and the Ukrainian Republic. Similar accents on the Ukrainian and Russian separation gradually disappeared from the documents at the end of the study period. And the children's town in Kiev was closed in 1931. Social labeling, important for the Stalinist state, was also important in the case of children. Class origin influenced the court sentence of the child, was interwoven into the educational process, discussed publicly among the inmates. Learning at boarding school for 6 years old learned about hostile attitudes to them from priests' families or curricul's families. When we see a questionnaire of a child whose family is labeled deprived, lishenцы, curriculi, enemy, it seems to be rhetorical why this child appeared to be in the orphanage. Where did family go? Children deprived of all prior social relationships suffered psychological trauma, which, according to their recollections, affected their later lives' social communications. It should be noted that the Soviet authorities considered its enemies so many different social groups that a large proportion of the staff of the special institutions were not socially close in terms of ideology. And for the employee state, choosing the right staff was important. And the main in the selection, judging from the questionnaire of applicants was the awareness of the need for introduction of orphans. The educators candidate had to understand the nature of the political upbringing of children and the importance of the child movement, for example. Finally, the contest was won by the one who understood that, citate, the political upbringing of children goes through the whole educational and upbringing process. In view of this, taking Soviet political courses by the applicants was more important than receiving a high school education or graduating from a university in the empire. At the same time, other documents give us the opportunity to understand that the greater motivation was the opportunity to get food ration, for example. Stalinist state, where the card system reopened in 1929, having access to a simple set of products was a real value. The moral choice, if a person faced it, receded in the face of the need to feed their own family. Often workers tried to feed their children into their institutions. I'd like to remind that during the Nuremberg trial, an American representative said about the Nazi removing children from slave families for their further upbringing. It doesn't matter that they were treated well. The main thing was that they were raised as true Nazis. The Soviet orphanage system removed children from their parents, sometimes killing those parents. It raised these children to be real Soviet people, and the system always has names, and it's not just Joseph Stalin, the names of the system and the educators who turned the child custody process into the production of the system cogs. Concluding my report, I'd like to thank you, the whole team of organizers, and thank you for your attention.